All right, so this is March the 8th, and we are going to be talking tonight, God willing, Job 12 through 14, or however how far we can go. Obviously, we've got to kick it in higher gear than what we've been doing. I have gone very slowly through Job 1 through 11 so that we can kind of get the gist of the arguments of his friends and Job all the way through there. In Job 12 through 14, you're going to find one of his Job's rebuttal to all of them. It seems like when you go through these series, you first have him talking to one, and he'll try to answer that one. Him will talk to the other next friend, and then the next friend he'll spend a little bit more time, and then at the end of the third friend, he goes into a longer diatribe against what they have been saying. And so then we start the process again. There's three series of speeches here. Job speaks, then his friend, Job speaks, and then you've got three actual sets as they're trying to wrestle with the whole purpose and the whole idea of evil, as they're trying to understand how God fits into all of this. Was God punishing Job? His friends thought so. Job will come back and actually talk to God about it and say, Lord, what have I done? Show me. And so all through this, you see them arguing with themselves, but also trying to the very best of their ability to understand and to grasp the whole problem of sin, of suffering, and why does it seem like that good people don't suffer? They make plenty of money. They don't go to church. They don't even try to do what God wants them to do. Those that are trying to do what's right, they're the ones that seem to suffer the most sometimes. They're suffering from people mocking them because of their beliefs. They suffer because of the fact that they're not making maybe as much money as others, and on it goes. So it seems like the world is literally upside down from the way it ought to be. And in a real sense, it is. When sin came into the world, everything got turned on its head. And the only time that it's ever going to get any better is whenever the Lord comes again and straightens everything back out. And so before that, though, he wants us to realize that he sent his son to die so that we could be saved. And that is what the gospel and the story of the Bible is all about. So we're grateful for that. But we do need to understand, as we look through Job, as we struggle with our understanding of the way what we think the world ought to be. Parents shouldn't bury children. People that are, there should be, in a sense, an even ground where we're all working on things together. I'm not a socialist. I'm not a communist or anything like that, where everybody's brought down to this low level and then just we all have to try to eke out a living. But there is something to be said about that. And the thing is that when it comes to what we find the Bible describing heaven as, then we understand that it's going to be everything that what we're talking about at this time. No more death, no more pain, no more sorrow, no more heartaches. And everybody's going to have exactly what they need. And in a sense, Christians, we all have what we need right now. Even if we have to suffer for our faith, we have what we need right now because we have Jesus. Before we go any further, let's pray. Josh, would you lead us, please?
Lord, we ask that we could learn well through your word, and that you would guide us into your wisdom and strengthen us through your word and your teaching. Lord, please look after those of us who might be going through other problems in life. All these things I pray through Christ Jesus. Amen.
Amen. We all have problems. We all have problems. So is it because of sin? Is it because of our mistakes? Is it because of our lack of intelligence? All of these things come into play here. Now, as we start looking at all of this, remember what we're talking about and try to keep all this in our minds and in our hearts. So we're picking up with Job chapter 12 tonight. I'm reading from the New King James Version as well as the English Standard Version. So that's where we're starting off. And we pick up with, as I said, so far as finishing his speech. And this, Job now takes 3 chapters. Up to this point in time, Job has taken 1 or 2 chapters to rebut his friends. But now he's going to take 3 chapters, which again emphasizes that that first cycle of speeches is over with. So he starts off by saying, Job answered and said, no doubt you are the people and wisdom will die with you. I want you to hear, as he's saying that, I want you to hear the sarcasm, the scorn. Job has heard his 3 friends, and he says, yeah, you guys, you're the ones that know everything, and wisdom will die with you. Yes, that's sarcasm. He's using this sarcastic, and really, when you get down to it, in this sarcastic way, I think in that speech, that's exactly what he's doing.
Is that a sin?
Is it some sin to be sarcastic? I think sometimes sarcasm just simply is a figure of speech. It's a way to get a point across.
What is that sin?
Is that sin by what he says? You are the wisdom, no doubt you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. Is that what you're saying?
Like his attitude, yeah.
It can get to the point of sin. Sometimes we struggle with people that's being sarcastic with us. So as we're looking at all of this, it could be. But it really depends upon the circumstances. Sometimes the only way some people will get something is through means of sarcasm. And this is why you find, again, there's other passages in the Bible where you find this bit of sarcasm.
It's like grumbling, doesn't
it? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the circumstance. In this situation, is he really grumbling? No, I think he's just really being, as you said, sarcastic to get the point across. You guys act like you know what it's all about, but you don't. You don't. He said, I have understanding as well as you. That's his point that he's trying to make. He tells them they're not the, in essence, what is he saying by using this? You're not the only ones that have wisdom. You're not the only ones that have it all figured out.
Sounds like a young man.
Yeah, in that case, but we also know that Job was probably the oldest man here. But he says, I have understanding just like you. You guys think you're the only ones that have any wisdom whatsoever. Sometimes we can come across that way, and we need to be very careful because that turns people off.
What?
Being sarcastic.
Oh.
I think it depends on the circumstance. Job and his 3 friends have a relationship, or they would not have been called friends. They obviously had got to the point to where they could understand these sarcastic comments, etc. But as this biting irony comes down hard on them, then you'll have to understand this. And I want you also to think about it, though it does not necessarily excuse it, but Job is still hurting. And all they're hurting is more and more and more.
I'm thinking, though, he can't take care of himself. Right.
And I think, yeah, because again, in this situation, he's been suffering through all of this, and he's hurting. And so we have to cut him a little bit of slack as he's saying these words as well.
But they might be feeding him with suffering.
Yeah, they might. Well, I'm not sure exactly what they are doing and what they're not doing. All we do know is it seems like they seem to continually accuse him of doing something to be in this situation.
I was just thinking because of the illness.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying about the illness. And again, that makes you be a little bit, whenever you're hurting, that makes you be a little bit shorter with temper, a shorter temper with somebody, sarcastic with people from time to time. He goes on and he says, you know what? He says, wisdom shall die with you. Hear the sarcasm again. He's hurting. They have hurt him. The first cycle of speeches from his friends were just nothing more than accusations. And so he says in verse 3, I want you to know I have understanding as well as you. I'm not inferior to you. And as we talk and see about him later, he will talk about times whenever he has gone to try to help people that have gone through some of the very things that he's struggling with as well. He claims not to be deficient from his friends at all. I know as much as you do. I'm not inferior to you. You are men just like I am. I'm not below you intellectually. I'm not below you morally. I'm not below you in any other way. And he says, who does not know such thing as these? What's he saying there in verse 3? I know that everything you've said, I probably have said to somebody as well. Job has learned that when you're going through it, it's different than when you're trying to help somebody through it.
What'd you say, Job?
Job has learned that when you're actually going through it, it's a lot different than trying to help somebody go through something. Mm-hmm. Could it be that in times past, and he will talk about this later as well, about how he went and talked to people and to encourage them? Did he use biting irony? Did he use sarcasm? Did he use a lot of this whenever he was helping them? As we read the text later, we're going to see that that's not necessarily the case. Mm-hmm. He says in verse 4, he says, I am one mocked of his neighbor. I am a laughing stock. The English Standard Version says, to my friends, I who called to God and he answered me, a just and blameless man am a laughing stock. He said, there's nobody there but doing nothing, but you have treated me with contempt. You have laughed at me. You had accused him of mocking God. But it has been Job that has been mocked, not God. And he says, this is what's so hard to bear about this. It was by my friends. I could deal with something with somebody that's not my friend. I've had people that I didn't even know come and fuss at me about something. Okay, well, that's fine. But now if it was a good friend, and they said the same things, then hopefully I would take it even to more heart. But yeah, family, that hurts too, doesn't it? Right? So he said, I'm a laughing stock. I'm just laughed to scorn, and here again, it was by his neighbors. Psalms 55, 12 and 13. And the way they did it, they were mocking him. They were mocking God, in a sense, whenever they were doing this. They laughed at a just, upright man. And they're saying, you got exactly what you deserve, Job. And again, it was based on their assumptions. Their assumptions that they had, that everybody else had. If you're going through hard times, obviously it's because you are a sinner and you need to repent. Now, again, we do know that there are passages in the Bible where people did have to pay the penalty for their sins, where because of bad decisions made.
Talking about Old Testament?
Yep. There are examples of Old Testament bad decisions made that people have to deal with that.
Wasn't that, though, to try to keep them out of society so that they didn't influence other people?
In a lot of situations, they would cut themselves off, or they would be cut off so that they wouldn't have the impact on the society.
No, I meant killing them too, though.
Yeah, in some situations they would be killed.
Yeah.
These bad decisions, especially for those that knew the law and didn't keep the law.
Yeah,
and that's why every once in a while there would be those situations where men would be killed because they weren't following what God says. So he says, he goes on here and he says, I've been laughed at. You've mocked me. They've laughed at me. And the bottom line is, he that is ready to slip with his feet, verse 5, in the thought of one who is at ease, there's contempt. It is ready for those whose feet slip. It's raining here in Georgia today. It would be easier for our feet to slip today than it would be at other times. In the same respect, what he's saying here is, he's saying to his friend that he feels like they've reproached him because they're still at ease. Everything's still going okay for them,
It's like a temptation.
Yeah.
Like it's done, made your feet to slip.
Right. They despise him who fell into poverty while they're slipping away as well. Those who are prospering a lot of times are praised and glorified. Those who are failing, those who are going down, those who are, going down the wrong road, we a lot of times say, let them go. It's easy for us to look, whenever we're living in a nice, beautiful home, to look at those who don't have a home and to judge somebody because they don't have a home, or when they're out on the street, they don't have a place to live. It's easy for us to sit there and judge them. And the bottom line is that it's easy to do that, Jesus will emphasize to us that that's the reason why we need to help our fellow human beings. Paul will say in Galatians 6:10, as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good to all men, especially to those who are of the household of faith. Jesus on numerous occasions would help people that most everybody else would shun. The Samaritan woman of John 4, the lepers, the blind, the women taken in adultery, John 8. A lot of those people would be ignored or by the more holy among them, and I'm using that term in a very derogatory way. They would be the ones that are holy should be the ones trying to help those that are sinning, but instead,
Forgive them.
yeah. And what are they doing? They're saying, in essence, they're closing the door to the kingdom. And before I throw a stone at the ones who wanted to kill the woman taken in adultery, John 8, I wonder sometimes how many times I've done that. Have I judged somebody based on what I think and perceive of their life as opposed to what they're really going through?
Yeah.
We've got to be careful.
Well, you know, when he pulled the stone thing, they would have been right?
Right.
To do it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying under the law, they would have been right. But Jesus was sort of changing it up a little bit.
Well, it's not that he would break the law or change the law.
I'm saying he's bridging the two covenants.
Yes, he is putting the two covenants together. But he also puts it at a higher level, right? Under the Old Testament law, it's more of your actions. In the New Testament law, it's the motives behind the actions.
Yeah.
He's going to judge the motives behind the actions. So we've all got to sit down and think about these things in that respect. He goes on in verse 6 through 11. He is contradicting and confronting what they said of the wicked in the world. And he's going to make the point here in verses 6 through 11 that sometimes the wicked prosper. And we know that. We ourselves know that in this world, a lot of times the wicked prosper. We were talking earlier before class started about the way the world is, about $5 a gallon gas, where we're struggling with the idea of why are we having to suffer in this respect, when literally, and I remember these days before Mr. Biden took office, the gas was at $1.60, and now we're pushing $5. And obviously decisions were made that brought about this whole situation. And then you have the war in Russia and the Ukraine and all of that going on. And I think what the devil does, and I think what we do a lot of times, is we put more faith and trust in government, in men, and in solving our own problems than in God. And that's why we're always in an uproar whenever the world is in an uproar. We don't look at God, we're looking at all the things that we're having to go through at that moment in time.
Jesus didn't want no part of all this.
Right.
He didn't want nothing to do with it. They tried to pull him into it, and then he said,
no,
give to Caesar what is Caesar's.
Unto God the things that are God's. So let's notice what he says here in light of, and what he's trying to say in encouraging, as it was, the idea of what they said of the wicked in the world. He says, now let me tell you, verse 6. He says, the tents of robbers are at peace. In other words, those robbers are at peace. They're they that provoke God, and those who provoke God are secure, who bring their God in their hand. The people that are worshiping idols, he says, are better off than those that are trying to serve God. Now, again, as you're looking at this situation, he's talking about it from a specifically worldly perspective. Let's also understand that this is his way of looking at it right now. I'm suffering. I don't understand why. As far as I'm looking at things, I see that robbers are getting away with things and they're living at peace while I'm suffering. Again, the friends had said that Job lost everything because of some sin in his life. And Job is just pointing out to them, well, think about the robbers and their dwelling places. And just think about the idea that there are some people that live in total rebellion to God, but they're secure anyway. Now they have earthly things. They have the food, clothing, and shelter that they need. And a lot of times, a lot of these folks, let's also be honest about this, are living not in tents, but in mansions.
This is like the rich man, though.
Yeah.
The rich man, I mean, he had like, that's what the Lord said, or Abraham said, you had this life luxury on earth.
Mm-hmm. Right. You had this, but then later everything got turned back around. So again, this is what Job is saying. Friends had said he lost everything because of some sins. And he says, well, look, just look at the house of some of these robbers, these Sabaeans, these Chaldeans who had robbed from him, who had taken his camels and so forth away. Go back and read chapter 1 again to kind of get that idea. He said, those that provoke God are secure. Some live in total rebellion to him, but they are secure anyway. God is, it seemed like they're secure. They're at peace. They're secure. And what are they doing? They're bringing their God in their hand. In other words, they are idolaters. They worship idols. And
who's those people he's talking about again?
The Sabaeans and the Chaldeans. Go back and read chapter 1, where they took off all of his camels and everything else. So he understands that. Then he says this, ask the beasts and they will teach you, the birds of the heavens and they will tell you, the bushes of the earth, they will teach you, and the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? Now, to further prove his point, he draws a lesson from the animal kingdom.
That's like Romans 1. Like Romans 1, where he talks about consecration. So I've seen that.
Yeah. Yeah, the point that he's trying to make in verse 6 is the ungodly seem to be prospering, right? But he says that in essence, that's not the case. That's not the case. All right. Look at the beasts. Now think about the beast. The stronger is always devouring the weaker. Lions eat cattle, right?
Yeah. Think
about the fact that cattle are they're stronger, and a lot of times whenever they're I've been around cattle, and the bottom line is you got to watch yourself around them, because again, especially if they've got horns, they can hurt you, they could gore you, they could hurt you in many, many ways.
I was thinking about the lions when you said that.
Huh?
I was thinking about the lions.
Yeah, and again, the beasts, they will teach you.
Thinking like the lions are violent.
Right, they are violent. The tigers, cougars, all of these animals in some way or another in that respect. The strong devour the weaker. God has an order to all things. This is the way it is in retribution. He says the fowls of the air, the birds of the heaven, they will tell you, okay? We kill birds of the field and eat them. What's fair about that? Well, it's really not, but I have enjoyed some quail before, and doves and things along that line, okay? I've raised chickens on a farm and killed them, and especially fried, something along that line. You know what I'm trying to say there. The antelope is killed or the lamb is killed by the lion. Now, what's fair about all of that? Really, when you start looking at the animal kingdom, is there any real fairness there?
No, they have to constantly run
their
life, and they develop gifts because of it.
Right.
To run and jump really high or whatever.
Right, like gazelles or something like that.
Get away from them.
That's exactly right. So the thing is, think about dogs and cats. We don't even have to go think about out the beast of the field. We just think about dogs and cats. The weaker is a lot of times will be killed by the stronger, right? God has his order in all things.
Birds do that too.
Yeah.
I didn't used to think that birds killed each other.
Yeah, they do.
They kill each other.
Yeah, I know they do. I know that for a fact. We raised chickens on the farm that I was on, and
hawks.
Then you have hawks and some of the other stuff. You had to make sure that they were protected. That's why we have hen houses. But even in a hen house, there'd be a pecking order.
Yeah, there's one that's bigger than the other.
Yeah, and he or she is always going to make sure that everything else is in line. Okay, that's just the way it is. Now, the thing is, what's fair about a lion killing an antelope? What's fair about a lion killing a cow? There's nothing.
It probably doesn't think it's very fair.
It's not fair.
I'm sure they don't think it's very fair.
It's not. That's exactly right. As you're being eaten, okay, it's not fair. As a snake kills a rat, or it squeezes a rat and then starts to eat it. A lot of times they'll eat it even before it's dead. So there we go. he says, you know what? There's nothing really fair in this world. And that's his point he's trying to make. The bushes of the earth, and they will teach you. The fish of the sea, they will declare it to you. You know, the bushes speak to the earth. Sunshine and rain are all ordered by God. There's a pattern. God's still in control, but again, fish will testify to the truth of Job's point. All they're doing is swimming around looking for something to eat, and then all of a sudden they bite something that's got a hook on it.
And then there's a bigger fish coming trying to eat it.
Yeah, possibly. Or we pull it out of the water, skin it, and fry it up, and eat some fried fish. You know what I'm trying to say. Is that fair? No.
They got, even whales get eaten.
Yeah. And so he's asking, after he makes these statements in verses 6-8, he's saying, you know, who knows not in all these things that the hand of the Lord hath wrought this? There's wise providence that rules and governs these things that we don't know of or acquainted with. We don't know all these things. We don't understand why they do what they do. We don't understand what motivates a lion to run down another animal. We don't understand it. Obviously, God made them that way. God made them to do that.
Is it true they were vegetarians?
Someone probably
has this theory that they were vegetarians.
They were vegetarians before the fall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because as you read Genesis chapter 1 again, it says all the animals ate of the grass of the field.
Yeah.
So it seems like it happens after the fall, they start eating one another. Okay, so go back and reread that and you see this. So the hand of the Lord has done all of this. Okay, we need to accept God's will, whether we understand it or not. And then he says this in verse 10, in his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. Job here summing up everything he said. All animals are under his control. Man is under God's control. And the bottom line is that we derive our being from him. We owe ourselves to him. We depend on him for the support of life. We lie at his mercy and are under his direction and control. We need to give ourselves totally to him. So then he goes on and he says, does not the ear test words as the palate tests food? So he says, as we're sitting here talking to one another, as you're telling me that I've sinned, as you're telling me that I have done things that are wrong and contrary to what needs to be, he says, you're listening to me, I'm listening to you. And does the ear test words as the palate tastes food? Okay, so we discriminate, we try to discriminate between wise and unwise words. Just like as you're eating, the palate tells the difference of something you like to eat and something you don't like to eat.
Being critical.
Huh?
You don't want being critical.
Well, I think what he's trying to say here is he says, you know, as we are all discussing this, Job is saying, you've told me some things. My ears have heard what you had to say. I'm being somewhat critical of what you have to say because what you've said doesn't necessarily fit in every situation.
Yeah.
As they listen to Job's speech, they're saying, look at you, Job. You claim to be innocent, but every other person we know of that's going through something like you're going through right now has done something to deserve it. So in essence, with Job and his friends, the speech is falling on deaf ears. And the fact that they're not listening to one another as much as they're trying to make their points. And they try to come back with one another to try to point this. So it's kind of like, again, he's challenging his friends to try his words or to listen to what he's saying with impartial judgment. And he said, if you listen to what I'm saying, you'll see that what I'm saying is truth. Just like the animals, just like everything else in the world, ask the beasts, the bushes, and everything else, not everything's fair in this world. Sometimes the stronger eats the younger, or eats the weaker. It's not fair, but it is what it is. And so he then goes on and says, wisdom is with the aged and understanding in length of days. So the longer we live, and there is validity to that, in one sense. The longer we live, the more experiences we've gone through, then we should know a lot more by the time we get older. But some folks don't learn. Some folks, and I'll confess that sometimes, depending on the circumstance, I've been one of those folks that had to learn something 3 or 4 or 5 times before it finally stuck. I think all of us do that in certain things. Okay. All of us, we struggle with things a certain way. And what happens as a result of that is sometimes we get it very quickly. Sometimes we don't. When we're younger, we especially think we've got our whole lives ahead of us. We think we can do anything. We are strong, healthy. There doesn't seem to be anything going wrong bad in our lives. And in one moment, an accident can change our lives forever. And we have to rely upon somebody else to take care of us.
Yeah.
Again, I emphasize that, and I may have shared this with you before. Please bear with me, but about 3 or 4 years ago, I fell after trying to cut down a limb off a tree, broke my back in 3 places. I live with that now every day of my life. I wish I had tied this ladder off. I wish, if I'd have had to do it over again, there's a lot of things I'd do different now, because I know now I was cutting down a dead limb off a tree.
Oh, okay.
And I had it leaned up against the tree, and it came back and hit the ladder, and it fell and I fell.
I did cable for a while, and I had to go like 35 feet up there.
Yeah.
And it's pretty scary. You gotta get over it pretty fast. Though.
I worked in cable whenever I first started as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I understand. I understand exactly. Sometimes you make a mistake and you don't even think too much about it. I think I've shared with you as well about last April. I was just trying to push my lawnmower in the shed. And then it hit something and it just stopped, and my arm didn't, and it tore a muscle or two. And it still
wasn't running.
No, it wasn't running.
Oh.
I guarantee you now, when I drive that thing up in there now, I do not push it up in there anymore.
It's like what do they say? You're supposed to take like potassium. So I have issues with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think it was like malnutrition or what it is.
Right.
I try to take vitamins now.
Right.
Because you can pull muscles and tendons really easily like that.
Yeah.
I do it all the time.
Pull them and even tear them. Yeah, that's right. So now, beginning in verse 12, wisdom is with the aged. With the ancient is wisdom, and the length of days understanding. You get wisdom gradually and painfully by much experience during a long lifetime. And it's not until you're older that you call them wise. Why? Been there, done that, don't want to do it again. You need to listen to what I'm trying to tell you. Don't do it this way. Do it this way, because you could hurt yourself this other way. I try to tell that to my boys sometimes. Look, I'm getting older. There's some things you don't do. Don't do this way.
You see it especially with the Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're big on the ancestors, and they respected them because it was like the ancestors told them how you're going to survive.
That's right.
If they didn't learn it,
if they didn't listen,
they were going to die.
They were going to die. That's exactly right. And that's the way, that's the whole point, the way it is. In the context here, when he's talking about this, Job is saying, listen to man's wisdom with God's wisdom. Man's wisdom will in no ways match or measure up to God's wisdom. Again, going back to what you said, Josh, you're exactly right. We need to show respect to those that are older than we are, because they've been through a lot more. I think a lot about for people that went through the Depression. Of course, most of them are not with us anymore, but they went through the Depression and then turned around and went through World War II.
Paul says, don't correct an old man.
Yeah. Or if you do it wisely,
I don't think he means like a salvation issue.
Yeah.
I think he means like if they're stuck in Judaism.
Yeah.
Double things in Judaism.
Right.
go.
And one of the things I've got written down here, and it's something to think about, one of the most wasted resources in the church and the world today are the elderly. We want churches that have a lot of young people. We will cater to young people. We try to get them in the building, but we need to listen to the older people. And I think we need to listen a lot more to them because they've been there, done that, saw what works, saw what doesn't work. And if we would listen to them, maybe we wouldn't make as many mistakes. Verse 13, he goes on and he says, with the aged. Now look about this, with God are wisdom and might. He has counsel and understanding. As we're reading through Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, that is known as the poetic books of the Bible, but it's also a lot of times called wisdom literature.
Which books you said? Psalms?
Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. Now, other books will have tidbits of wisdom in them, but as I said, those books are called what we call the wisdom literature.
Yeah.
And so this is important. And that's the reason why we need to study these. God has wisdom. God has all wisdom. And God is almighty. Okay? He is eternal. He doesn't need time to think. He already knows what's going to go on.
He's already made an action.
He's already made actions as far as he's concerned. He knows exactly when he's going to call an end to this earth.
Mm-hmm.
He knows exactly what judgment day is going to look like. Yeah. He knows all of that in every respect of the term. He's giving us opportunities now to make the best of what we've got. And so we need to be very wise. He's emphasizing, God doesn't need to go through any experiences so as to give him this wisdom. The bottom line is there's nothing that could help God to gain it. So he says, that's the reason why verse 13, with God are wisdom. In fact, as we're reading through the Bible, that is the wisdom of God. And God's might, okay? He has counsel and understanding. He didn't have somebody teach him something. It was not acquired. It was not something that was given to him. It just belongs to him because of who he is.
That's another unfathomable thing for people, I guess.
Yeah, it is for all of us. Number one, we can't understand eternity. We can't wrap our mind around eternity. We think of something going on forever and ever and ever and ever. But the way the Bible defines it, it's something that has no beginning and no end. And I can't wrap my mind around that. There's always a beginning of a day and the end of the day.
There's no hurry.
Yeah.
There's no hurry to do anything.
That's right. Being everywhere at once, I can't wrap my mind around that either.
Yeah. Because
I have to be in a specific place at a specific time because I'm a human being. So God has wisdom and might. He has this counsel and understanding. And so, again, it's not something somebody gave him. He has it. He's God. This is part of the reason why I love studying Job and Psalms and a lot of it, because a lot of the wisdom literature in the Bible glorifies God. It reminds us, it keeps before us the God that we serve, his omnipresence, his omnipotence, his eternality, his wisdom, his might, his power. You name every characteristic of God that's in there, and that's it. You can't really begin to understand it. So he goes on and he says, a man, if he tears down, if God tears something down, it can't be built again. Mm-hmm. That's it. You're not going to thwart God's purposes.
I was thinking people think they're going to stick and move when they die or something like.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go in this direction, or you're not gonna do that.
No.
You're not gonna get past it.
Nope.
You're gonna go for judgment.
Yep. Think about the idea that God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, and Sodom and Gomorrah is still destroyed, right? Bottom line is the Tower of Babel in Genesis. Earlier again in Genesis, it's gone. It's gone. If God chooses to shut a man up by giving calamities or other circumstances, no man can do anything about that.
Maybe it's like people doing drugs or alcohol to try to eliminate or forget about their problems. Maybe they just feel like out of sight, out of mind or something.
Yeah, I think that's what they do. And that's the only time they can find any peace, as it was. And that's the sad tragedy of it all. He goes on and says, if he withholds the waters, they dry up. Living on a farm, you don't need a drought. And again, it's sometimes I've seen sometimes where that's been tough, where you plant and everything like that, but if you don't get water, it's not you.
There's some spots where people have tried to live and they couldn't live there because they don't have any water.
Yeah, the Sahara Desert's got some water, but not enough for anybody to live out there on.
Yeah, that's why that's why the land's cheap too.
That's exactly right. And why, the only good thing is you got a lot of sand. What are you going to do with it? If he withholds waters, if he sends the waters out, they overwhelm the land, flood.
Yeah.
Okay. Now think about this. Think about how we in our country, we've done a lot of controlling the water in the fact of dams. I lived up in Florence, which was on the Tennessee River, and literally about 12 miles from my house was the Wilson Dam, where it, and again, they controlled it and everything like that, and supposedly it controlled it. But I have been by there numerous times after heavy rains, and they've got the spillways wide open. Because
that's how Lake Lanier is. Lake Lanier is scary in a way. They have that alarm. It's like, go.
Yeah.
Like in case something happens, go.
Yeah.
It's like an alarm that tells everybody, they flooded a town there. They didn't even clean it up.
Yeah.
They just
flooded their town. That's right.
It's crazy.
That's why it wasn't too long ago when we were going through the drought here in Georgia that they were trying to keep everybody off of Lake Lanier because some of the church spires and steeples and all were coming. They had sunk. Yeah, the water has sunk down to the point to where you can see those crosses and everything in the water.
When?
Yeah, it was. I want to say it was about 10, maybe 15 years ago.
That's weird. Oh yeah, it was probably the army.
Yeah. So the thing is there. That's what's happening. He says if he withholds the water, it's not it. He binds them up as a garment, Proverbs 30, verse 4. He holds them in the hollow of his hand, Isaiah 40, verse 12. God can bring judgment by land or by water. Yeah, the flood, Genesis 6-9. He can bring judgment by drought that causes famine and death. Deuteronomy 11:17. He talks and warns them of the fact that if they don't stay faithful to the Lord, that he will send drought and
funny
famine.
That even though they may not believe in the real God, that even the pagan worshipers knew that there's something supernatural. All of them knew that.
Right.
There's something supernatural about this water that comes out of the sky.
That's right. And that was even before they understood like we do. We kind of understand the water cycle where the sun evaporates the water, brings it up into the air. Yeah. And then whenever it gets a certain amount,
it's like one of those, it's like the human body. They don't really understand.
Well, as best as we can.
It's like, if the clouds are getting dark, it's going to rain. Yeah. They don't really, they take a lot of guesses at things too. And, I mean, they can determine certain things like, oh, it might rain because there's a lot of humidity there.
Right.
They don't understand like, okay, well, this is where it comes from. And that's why it doesn't happen.
And you're right in that respect. We still don't know a lot of that stuff, but it's still pretty good whenever they can sit there on the Weather Channel and say at 8:30 it's going to start raining.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it rains and they didn't say it was going to.
I used to call that guy Charles Bronson. It was on the Fox 5 news. He was the highest paid weatherman. And he predict the weather. A lot of times it would not happen. Yeah. He's like the highest paid weatherman in the country. Yeah. Ever.
Yeah. Let's see. Where was we? Yeah. With him are strength and sound wisdom, verse 16. The deceived and the deceiver are his. Now, I like this passage. Think about this. God not only has the wisdom to do certain things, he has all wisdom, but he has the strength to carry it out. The deceived and the deceiver are his. The whole world is full of deceit. And God, here Job is emphasizing that God uses both types of men to carry out his will. The deceived and the deceiver. You're going to have some people that's always going to be taken. And then there's always going to be those that's going to be what? Taking them, right? Taking them somewhere or another. There's another way to look at this as well. Think about the idea that, God will allow some to be deceived, some to deceive. And so think about it this respect, evil in a sense still is under his control, right?
I was thinking that the way they're saying it there was thinking that it means like he's got them, that they're dead. Like he does have them, the ones that have fallen or whatever, the ones who are not in the Lord, right?
Well, again,
he's got them in his hand, and he's got them in a place where he's put them.
Yeah. And as I was reading this again, I was reading through my notes a little bit here and talking about how the world is full of deceit, and think about Jacob and Esau and how, Jacob did his brother wrong. He allows, again, some to be deceived and some to deceive. And a lot of times think about, who do we often call the deceiver? Satan.
Yeah.
But does he not still control how far Satan can go? Yes. Because even in Job's case, as we've seen up to this point in time, he says you can go this far and no further.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing we've got to realize. We also have to realize that evil in that sense, and here's where we struggle with this sometimes, moral evil still is under God's control. God will say, okay, you can go thus far and no farther. So we immediately begin to ask ourselves, why would God allow World War II? Why would God allow the Ukraine-Russian situation right now? Why would God allow that evil to go on? Well, it is. You're exactly right. It is a lot of egos. But then during World War II, it was the ego of the Japanese and Germany. Yeah. And again, Genesis, World War I, it was Germany again. Earlier. So the bottom line is, we look at all of that. He's in control of evil, but he still allows evil to exist.
One thing I would say with the deceived and deceivers, that verse that so many people misunderstand about the vessels for good and evil. And I think the point of that verse, obviously it's taken out of context. I think the point of it is actually, we are the vessels of evil.
Right.
We were that.
Right.
We're Gentiles by nature. We weren't good. We weren't in a relationship with God.
Romans chapter 1.
And he's talking about why are they allowed to, the vessels that are prepared for evil, or what? Why are they allowed to live? It's basically the story. That's what he's saying.
Right.
Why are they allowed to live? That's you. It's like what he's trying to say. He's like, that's you and everybody else here. That's the right. Gentiles.
That's right.
That's us.
So as we're looking about this and thinking about this is, again, struggle for a lot of us. And here it is, Job bringing this point out. Why is there still evil in the world if God is a good God? Why do we discuss the difference between good and evil?
Because he wants them to repent.
That's right. And he wants us to see where we go. But then you have a whole group of people out there now, it seems like, and they're not a majority, but, they're saying, well, there is no such thing as good and evil. That's just the way we are. That's the way we always are going to be.
Everybody's just good.
Yeah, everybody's just good.
And that's a silly, childish thought, because they could go certain places where that's just based on people's standards.
Right.
You go to another country, their version of good is something totally different.
Totally 100% different. And that's, I think, part of the reason why we struggle so much with the idea of what is good and what is evil. We in America would think certain things are good, whereas over in other places, they would say, no, that's sinful, that's evil, that's evil. So that's the reason why we need God's word. That's the reason why we need God to tell us what is right and what's wrong. And there is then also the idea of what Paul was saying in Romans chapter 1. They know it in themselves. Even though they may not have a law against murder, they know in themselves whenever they kill another human being, they've done something wrong.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I've known that about people.
So that's the struggles. That's the struggles. And that gets us again into a deeper issue that we don't really have the time to get into, obviously, right now. So the deceived and the deceiver are his. Verse 17, He said he leads counselors away stripped or spoiled, and judges he makes fools, okay? The counselors, the wise of the earth cannot resist him or escape him. God has ruined their goings. The wise of the earth, this would be the ones that know how to rip people off, you know. They know how to live and steal and rob and so forth.
Yeah.
And they're always trying to sell you something you don't need. He makes their judges as fools, you know, he deprives them of their wisdom. And God turns their judgments around and make them look like fools. Think about how some of the judgments have been overturned because it was just, they should have never been convicted to begin with. You know?
What are you talking about? In court?
In courts and things along this line. All right. So he says that he makes the judges fools. He loosens the bonds of kings and binds a waistcoat cloth on their hips. The bottom line is he takes away from kings the power and authority by which they rule their subjects. He strips them of the honor and prestige that is theirs, and he girds their loins with a girdle. And the idea of girdle is a servitude, a towel, as it was, wrapped around. So kings will be servants as opposed to being served. And this also encourages me a little bit. But it's also something to think about. And again, it's a whole nother study that we don't really have the time for this evening, but that's something that I just want to throw out there to make us think about a little bit. If it is the case that God brings up and sets down kings, and we do see that, especially with his kingdom, Israel. We know Saul, David, Solomon, and then the divided kingdom and the kings of each one of Israel and the 10 northern tribes, and then Judah as well. Over and over again, the Bible does bring out the fact that God sets up kings and brings down kings. So immediately and this is something I've struggled with, and maybe somebody can help me as we're struggling with this together. If that is the case, then can we really say that God brings up and sets down presidents? We brag about how we vote certain guys in office, and God may be sitting back all along saying, no.
Well, this is, I know, especially with those false prophets that were talking about Trump's going to be in office. I was like, oh, no, he's not. He's definitely not going to get it now. Just because all these clowns said that, he's definitely going to make sure.
Yeah.
I was thinking though, America, but see, you know, I mean, I know that America's done some stuff that's not biblical, but you know, America is a victory. It's a victory in God's
right,
because from what it came from and what was before that, and he did tear down those strongholds, and he led them their own confidants or their own kings, the Pope's own kings, against him. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, Napoleon went in there and took him captive, and that was the fall. And all these other people jumped on bandwagon with us. And we were like, we're going to start a new country, and we're going to read the Bible. You know what I'm saying?
But then where have we gone since then?
I mean, but that's just, it's like, it seems like Sodom or whatever. I don't know. But, you know, it's just like where people go more and more wicked. That's because they moved away from that.
Right.
They've lost sight of those principles, though.
Right.
It's like, oh, well, we want to live in a society where people don't murder each other.
Right.
Okay, well, we designed that. We got that from God.
Right. And that's just as it should be. And you're exactly right. That is as it should be in that respect. But, you know, sometimes I guess the way I'm looking at things is we sit and brag about and be proud of who we vote in and out of office. We get in the church and get into arguments about who would have made the better president, okay? And sometimes that even splits the church.
Yeah.
And is that really what God wants? No.
I think politics is divisive.
It is extremely divisive. And I think the whole thing today continues to exasperate that problem.
Yeah.
In the fact that we are continually trying to say that one party is better than another party, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
If you have a hope in a man, he's going to let you down.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right. So we're going a little further. Let's see, where were we? He looses the bonds of kings, verse 18. He takes their power away and puts them as servants. Verse 19, he said he leads priests away stripped and overthrow the mighty.
Mine says prince.
Okay, now the New King James Version says princes, priests. The English Standard,
totally different.
or the King James Version says he leads princes away. The English Standard Version says he leads priests away stripped. Yeah. So God looks at kings as mere men. He uses people, princes. And again, it would seem like it would be more princes than priests. I'll have to go back and do a little bit more study on why it mentions this, why it's translated priests in the English Standard Version. But even in that respect, think about the idea of how it could fit when you've got kingdoms and now you've even got priests who maybe have been priests for years, and everybody looks up to them and respects them as being godly men. And then lo and behold,
that's leaders, just leaders.
They're just leaders. That's right. But think about how many of there are so many preachers that have fallen because of sexual sin.
Oh, you talking about our churches, or are you talking about
I'm talking about church all the way around. Okay. I mean, it seems like every time we turn around, these big guys that have these big, massive ministries.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Usually are wound up.
That's like a sign of a false prophet, right?
Yeah, seriously.
That's like usually a sign of a false prophet.
Yeah.
All of them did it. Seems like.
All right, we go on to verse 20. He said he removes the speech of those who are trusted and takes away the discernment of the elders. He confounds the speech of the great orators. Think about how great decisions have been made by great speeches.
What do you mean? Like
Patrick Henry.
Leadership? I don't know.
Think about Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry during the Revolutionary War, he will stand up and say, give me liberty or give me death, right? Think about Hitler.
Yeah.
How he literally turned an entire nation around from being defeated in World War I.
Yeah, they were in a bad place. That's what people forget.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
They were in a really
to a point to where they rearmed themselves and created another huge, massive war.
Trying to take over the world.
Yeah, and he came
close.
Very, very close to doing it.
Yeah.
And yet, what does he say? He confounds the speeches of great orators, or he deprives the speech of those who are trusted. The ideal is that what? He makes them away as nothing. He can make them appear to be bumbling idiots, faltering through their speeches and their words. Okay. He says he takes away the discernment of the elders, those that are the aged. He could turn the wise men into fools, right?
Well, I think that's the case with a lot of these scientists and stuff like that. Like, it's a whole lot of theory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to have a lot of faith to believe in something that.
In a lot of theory, you're exactly right. But it's through their theories that they were able to do a lot of things.
But I'm saying, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking actual science. I mean, like, I'm talking about like evolution.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Like, I'm saying science is science, but like some of those things, it's like you're talking about what makes a fool. It makes them a fool. Like, they don't see it. Right. But we see it.
Yeah.
Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
We come from monkeys. Like,
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Verse 21, he pours contempt upon princes and weakens the strength of the mighty.
So he just said that.
Well, he said it earlier. The ideal of, so it's kind of like judges, kings, priests, princes, those that are in authority. Think about the idea. I'm trying to read here. God turns into a disgrace. They think saying something by means of their strength. He uncovers the deep out of darkness. A lot of commentators seem to think this has reference to plots, wicked men scheme in their darkness. They're planning to do evil. Okay, and God reveals it.
It does say that sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Because that's a term that I've heard before.
Mm-hmm.
That he does say something about that they speak in darkness, it'll come to light.
Come to light. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And again, when you start looking at this, he A lot of examples, number 32:23. Be sure your sin will find you out. God knows what we think, what we do. We shall all give an account to God one day. Verse 23, he makes the nations great and he destroys them. Think about not only individuals that he's been talking about, such as deceiver, counselors, judges, kings, priests, princes, all these things, all these people. He's talking about them individually, but now he thinks about it. He makes nations great.
Yeah, probably empires.
And think about, again, he destroys them as well. He destroys them. And so all we've got to do is start referencing Israel, Babylon, Ammon, Assyria, Rome, Egypt, Edom, Moab, Ammon, Rome,
Greece too.
Greece. What else? On and on and on and on it goes. Germany.
Yeah.
Think about Germany, right? Germany, we were just talking about a few minutes ago. Japan, right? All these nations. They get it, and then he brings them down.
Yeah.
He increases the nations. He makes the nations great by blessing them. He allows them to destroy themselves because of internal decay, civil war, lack of morality.
It's like I said, there's an ego.
Yeah.
A lot of ego.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like hunger for power, maybe.
That's right. So he brings them up and he allows them to fall down.
Because it's their weakness.
That's right.
That's their weakness. Vanity or whatever, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. He takes away understanding from the chiefs of the people of the earth and makes them wander in a trackless waste.
Mm-hmm.
These chiefs, he deprives them of their wisdom, deprives them of their heart. They're so confused and perplexed, they don't know where they're going or what they're doing. He leads them away. And they're just wandering around trying to figure it all out. Verse 25, they grope in dark without light, and he makes them stagger like a drunken man. The bottom line is, look at what he's saying here. They're staggering.
Like a drunken man was like embarrassment.
Yeah, it is embarrassing.
Embarrassment, that's what it sounds like.
It is. It is.
They're embarrassed, but they're babbling like fools.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. Let's take a quick break with chapter 13. All right, we're picking up with chapter 13 now. And this is one of my favorite passages. It's a passage that I've memorized, and I want you to think about it. Job, again, in this chapter, he continues to defend his arguments. And again, he's complaining about the conduct of his friends, and he still talks about his relationship with God. And so as you look at this in verses 1 and 2, what we've studied about in chapter 12, he gives a termination of all of his arguments. And he says, in essence, that all this has to be turned to God. My eye has seen all this. My ear has heard and understand. What you know, I know. I am not inferior to you. And so what's he saying to his friends? He says, you know what? I've seen what you've seen. I've heard what you've heard. And I understand what you are saying. And I probably have said it sometimes to some others myself. He says, what you know, I know. I'm not inferior to you at all. So it's not, you're not telling me something I don't know. And you're not encouraging me by continually telling me that I'm lost, in essence, because of what I've done. Chapter 4, verse 8, chapter 5, verse 27. Let's look at a couple of them again. Just kind of remind ourselves.
Where are you going?
Job 4:8. Let's see what some of the things he has. Eliphaz said this in chapter 4, verse 8. Even as I've seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. Well, Job's saying, in essence, I know that. If you sin, you're going to pay the penalty. Chapter 5, verse 27. And we have searched it out. It's true. Hear it, know it for yourself. Yeah. People will be destroyed because of their sins. People will have to pay for their sins. He said, I agree with all of that. I agree with all of that. I've heard it. I've understood it. I know it. I'm not inferior to you. And it's also interesting in chapter 12, verse 3. He said, I am not inferior to you. Now here again in chapter 13, he says, again in verse 2, 12:2, 13:2, I'm not inferior to you. I know these things. You know, I think Job thinks that God would not be as hard on him as his friends have been. Okay. So he goes on. 13:4. Excuse me, 13:3. But I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to reason with God. But you are forgers of lies. You are all worthless physicians. Okay, so now, okay, I would speak to the Almighty. Job is saying, I'm tired of disputing with you. I'm tired of arguing with you. The more you oppose me, the more he wishes that he could actually bring God down here and talk to God face to face. He wants to know from God.
Can't see his face.
Huh?
Can't see his face.
Yeah, I know that.
But
I'm saying, you know what I'm trying to say there. You know what I'm trying to say.
I know.
Yeah. I think Job is thinking that God will not be as hard on him as his friends are, you know. And so he's saying, you know, if I can get God here, talk to me about this, he will listen at least. He's not going to keep going back to the same lame arguments.
That'd be scary.
It would be scary.
I'm saying it might be scary if you, especially if you made him angry and then he showed up.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. So he goes on. Now, notice here you begin to see his exasperate. You're forgers of lies. They felt they were judging his words. What he feels like is they are misrepresenting everything he said. They had accused him of hypocrisy, all based on their preconceived ideas of God's justice, that God punishes evildoers. And they're just sitting there to themselves thinking, Job, if you would just repent, all this would be over with. Job says, I have nothing to repent of. Not what you're talking about. And so they're looking at him, you're just a big hypocrite. And the longer you stay doing this, the worse it gets. So that's the way they're looking at things. And so he calls them physicians of no value, worthless physicians, worthless doctors. You know, the bottom line is that you came for the ideal of comforting me, chapter 2, verse 11, but now you've just added insult to injury.
It's like when they were attacking Paul, they were saying that, oh, you sinned, or you're not a strong apostle.
Right.
You know, you're weak.
Right.
Or whatever. You can't make anything happen. Something like that.
But Paul, not sinned. Yeah. Paul gloried in that.
I'm blameless, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Because people misunderstood those scriptures to mean, oh, he's living in sin. That's not true.
That's right.
It's not accurate.
That's right.
He says, I'm blameless.
That's right.
I know no sin.
That's right. So he's making that whole point. He isn't any wiser. Job isn't any wiser for what they've said. They have not helped him at all. They have not encouraged him. They have not, other than to repent of something that they thought he must have done. No, you're not helping me. So a lot of good it would be, you know, sometime back, personal anecdote very quickly. Sometime back, I fell out of a tree and broke my back. Went to the doctor. They did x-rays, MRIs. And they found that 3 of my discs were fractured. 2 in the top, 1 in the bottom.
Yeah.
I think I've shared this with you before, but they said, you need to go see a neurosurgeon. I went to the neurosurgeon. The neurosurgeon said, well, I'm going to keep an eye on it. See if it shifts any or does anything different. But right now, we're not going to do anything. I said, okay, all right. Went back after a whole nother bunch of x-rays, another bunch of tests. And he says, yeah, he said, I think we're just going to leave it the way it is. You need to come back in about another month and we'll run some more x-rays and all. But he said, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to do anything.
Did they send you the chiropractor?
No, he didn't send me to a chiropractor nowhere else. He just did that. And the bottom line is, and I'm sitting there thinking, and as I drove off, my wife was with me and I looked at her, I said, honey, there's no need of me going back and seeing him.
Yeah, I guess
there's no need of me going and getting more x-rays and more of this other stuff that I've got to pay for
Yeah.
There's no need of me going back and seeing him.
But you do definitely get a second opinion.
Seriously. And the thing is by this time, 2 months later, if he had decided to do something, it would have been maybe too little too late.
Yeah. I broke my cheekbone in 4 places, and they were talking about all this and passed me off from one person to another. And Grady charged me $20,000 to do nothing, take x-rays. And then they finally passed me off to the VA, and they're like, it was the same doctor. In each hospital I went to, it was the same doctor. They called him over. And then he's like, yeah, I don't think we're going to do anything. Because they were talking about they were going to put like a plate in there or fix it somehow. So it's just broken in 4 places. They didn't fix it. They do.
So again, here we go. Why keep going back to a doctor that isn't going to do anything? And that's the question. And then that's kind of he says, I've come to you. You're telling me these things. You're not helping. It's not getting any better. I've not done anything. So therefore, I'm not any wiser for anything you've said. I've already told you. I know everything you know. So why? Why bother? Why bother this discussion? And so he says this in verse 5, oh, that you would be silent and it would be your wisdom. He said, you want to know what's going to be wise? Just shut up.
Basically.
That's it. Yeah.
Basically in Jewish talk.
The King James says, oh, that you would altogether hold your peace. In other words,
just seeing they're not encouraging, but I'm sorry, but I don't really see that in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of encouraging. Like they say encouraging words like in the Bible, but to each other, I'm talking about. Do you hear a lot? I don't hear a lot of encouraging.
I don't either.
It seems like they accuse people a lot.
They do accuse people a lot in the Old Testament.
Critical of them.
Yeah. They also, if they do any encouraging, a lot of times it's to sin.
And look at the Pharisees.
Yeah.
And look at how they were acting. And they were trying to pick people apart and all this kind of stuff.
That's exactly right. Same song, second verse. So he says, when his friends came, the Bible says they came and they didn't say nothing for 7 days. And he's, he wishes that they just go back to being quiet again. He says, one person said, speech is silver, silence is golden. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 and 7, and Proverbs. Sometimes we do more harm with our speech than just being silent.
Yeah.
We hurt people more. We create more problems by what we say.
Especially in certain situations.
Yeah, especially in certain situations. And so,
especially like someone's died or something, it's better just be respectful.
And be respectful and go on. You don't sit back and judge them and talk about whether they've gone to heaven or hell and things along that line. Anyway, so he goes on, verse 6. Hear my reasoning. Hear my reasoning and hearken to the pleading of my lips. Hear the pleading of my lips. Now, he said, you've made some arguments. Listen to my arguments. Listen to what I'm saying. There is a difference between listening and hearing. There is a difference between listening and hearing.
Yeah.
Okay. Again.
I used to say that about Jimi Hendrix. Is to say you listen, but you don't hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. And think about this. How many times I think about this on any Sunday morning. We gather together and we worship with the saints, and people are listening to the preacher. Some are listening, some are hearing. Think about how sometimes we let our mind wander all over the world while we're listening to a teacher, a preacher.
They should be kind of captivating.
It should be.
I'm not just saying the message should be, I'm saying they should be a little captivating.
Yeah, yeah. But let's also understand that some days the preacher's not on his best either.
We used to, in the Army, when we was at base training, we go to church or whatever else, they had people fall asleep in there because they try to go in there and get sleep. And the preacher, he's a captain, and he'd go around and wake up.
Yep.
Wake up.
Yep. What would happen if a preacher did that today? He'd be fired just that quick. want to go down that road. He said, hear the pleading. Will you speak wickedly for God and talk deceitfully for him? Will you, he says, verse 8, show partiality for him? Will you contend with God? Will it be well with you when he searches you out? Can you mock him as one mocks a man? So I think Job is trying to convince them in verses 7 through 9, the idea of the error they did to God and thinking they were advocating his way and saying that Job deserved the punishment. You know, they are convinced that Job is suffering because of some sin. They can't prove any sin. They suggest sins, but they can't prove any. So they make a sinful assumption of sin and then try to defend God over something other than the truth, right? God did this to you because of some sin. Job said, I have no sin. So what are they saying? Well, God has done something to you because you have sinned. Job's saying, I haven't sinned. Well, then God's done something, so come up with a better explanation. And this is what the book's about, right? What's the explanation? Why do good things or bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to bad people? Mm-hmm. You know, life just doesn't work that way. So, you know, try to defend something, God was something other than, you know, they believe something to be false, or they believe something false, and then try to prove that God is just because of what he did.
That's like he said, though. Jesus said, well, you know, your riches, store your riches on earth, and it will get rusty and moth driven.
Right.
You know, that's like
right.
That's how their riches are. And they say that about there's a one about the master who has not servants but employees and doesn't pay his employees.
Yeah.
And he says your gold will perish with you, it will
That's
rust.
Right. In the book of James, I think he emphasizes that idea. So they believe something false. They are judging God and judging God's justice, and thereby God judging God. They spoke wickedly for God by being uncharitable. They had to trick their conscience. They honestly examined the evidence. They would have had to acquit Job, right? There's nothing there to prove that what they were saying he's done. Will you accept God's person? You're biased judges. You made up your mind as to way things ought to be. If something is wrong, the cause of wrong wins. It's because of biased judges. God is always right. He doesn't need biased judges to help him. No. Will you contend for God? Will you contend for God? Will you speak wickedly for God? You know, Job is he's laying it on him here. So if God's justice is clouded and unclear, will you pretend to plead his cause? You who are weak and passionate, is it good that he should search you out? Will it be well when he searches you out? Mm-hmm. Job is turning it on him now, isn't he? Is it going to look good? Are your motives so pure that, as you have said and attributed these things to God, are your motives so pure that when God judges you, you're going to be able to?
Aren't we supposed to take our lumps, though, kind of?
Huh?
Aren't we supposed to kind of take our lumps and keep on trucking?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. In some situations, yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't know. That's something I would do, right there. Mm-hmm. But that may not be right either.
Right.
Well, what I'm saying is I might flip it around a little bit sometimes, maybe, depending on the situation. I don't know if they were accusing me. I would probably just be like, okay.
Well, again, you're hurting. They're there to try to help you, and all they're giving you is hard time. You're hurting and really struggling, and all they're there is giving you a hard time. So what else could you say? What else could you do? You know?
But I mean, in general, though, what now?
Yeah.
I mean, this is years ago, before all this, before Jesus. But now we should try to be peaceful and just not go into that.
Judge not that you be not judged.
No, just not go into it, though. Not feed into it, right? Like, then if someone is like persecuting us like that and they're saying, oh, well, you're doing some sin or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we should just be like, all right, then. Okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, don't argue with them.
Yeah.
Right?
Can you mock him as you mock a man? No. He will surely rebuke you if you secretly show partiality. So what's Job saying in verse 10? You know what? Despite the fact that you're taking God's side, he's going to condemn you.
He's getting almighty, like the dude was getting almighty with him. So now he's getting like,
in a sense, that's true.
Like he's getting.
That's right. He's laying it on them now.
Yeah.
He will rebuke you if you show partiality. So you're saying these things about God, and God's going to turn around and make you pay for that. And at the end of the book, he asked Job to pray for his friends because they have not said the right things about me.
Yeah.
Job or God will speak and say, Job is the only one that did say something right about me. So he's trying to emphasize to them, I'm in the right, you're in the wrong. And as it's all over, they're going to see that they're in the wrong. So he goes on, verse 11, shall not his excellency or excellence make you afraid, his dread? You know, he makes the point that God's going to reprove them if they judge biasly. Now he makes the point that God's excellence should make them afraid.
Yeah.
You've judged me wrong. Now you got to remember God is so excellent. Man is so sinful that it should be nothing but fear in our hearts when we think that we are close to the Almighty. And a lot of times think about when men came or when God appeared to men, they would always fall down and worship.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
that's a good thing.
It is. It's a very good thing. It's something that we need to think a lot about and meditate on. What if every Sunday we thought about it from that viewpoint and realized, you know, we say that God is in our midst as we sing these praises to him. Do we really act like he is?
Or if we had gone in the temple, we saw the temple and went in there and we did something that we weren't supposed to or didn't have the right attitude and just got struck down
right then and there on the spot.
Fire or something.
How many churches?
A lot of people would not.
I think about this a lot. And again, I look at myself too.
Have you ever watched those videos where there's just crazy stuff going on in churches?
Yes.
They make these videos.
Yeah.
This guy just shows all these different, like, what are they doing in this church? Just craziness.
I've seen some of those things.
And it's just, about that. It's like,
well, it's that.
I mean, it's not to judge somebody. Yeah. And I know in their heart they think they're doing good, but yeah, like some of the, like, you know, back then, if you went into the temple or you did something falsely there, that was death. Aaron's sons got killed right on the spot.
Yep, the priest did. The priest did. In the tabernacle, you're exactly right. What if? You know, what if? That's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother sermon. What if? So in view of God's excellencies, you know what? You're making these judgment calls on him. And the bottom line is he's going to blow you away. You're going to be like nothing. Our body is going to turn back to clay. Our body's going to go back to nothing.
Dust.
Right? Dust. Yeah. Dust you are, and to dust you shall return.
And we do turn into dust
after
a while.
That's right. Sometimes a little quicker.
You're talking about old people.
Well, not necessarily the old people. But again, you don't get your body embalmed, you will turn to dust a whole lot quicker.
Some people are saying they probably already are dust.
Yeah.
Dusty.
So look at this. Notice verse 13. He said, your platitudes are proverbs of ashes. Your defenses are defenses of clay. We all going to go back to clay anyway. So you have nothing. You have nothing. You have nothing. Let come on me what will. Now, I love, okay, so now he said this all the way up through verse 12. Now in verse 13, let me speak, hold your peace, then let come on me what may. If you're right, and if I've sinned, you need just to be quiet and let my destruction come on me. If you're right that I've sinned, then just be quiet and let everything bad that's going to happen to me happen to me. You can't do nothing about it anyway.
Yeah.
Just let it be.
That sounds like
there's nothing for you, nothing else. And Job says, come on me what will. Job is prepared to face the worst. He feels as he must speak. And then he kind of like, God, you do what you want.
Listen carefully to my speech.
That's right.
Look at my words.
Yeah. The question is, in verse 13, does he shift from talking to the friends to God? I don't know that you can make that argument.
It doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that there's a shift, but it does say that so some people, some of the commentaries, especially when you look at my version here, you have 13 goes to here.
That's third
there's
person.
A break. Yeah.
That's third person because he said, I will defend my own ways before him.
Mm-hmm.
If he was talking to God, he would say, I will defend my ways before you, or something like that, right? Don't you think? Well, again, they may have anticipated the verses. I don't know what the Hebrew looks like.
Yeah,
that's something.
And that's the other thing.
Or Aramaic, whatever it is. I think it's Hebrew. I believe it's Hebrew.
And again, you probably have a good point in that verse 15. As I said, that's one of my favorite verses there.
I found some the other day. They anticipated it. I mean, I don't get into it.
Yeah,
they anticipate what it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those words mean more than there being three different things, and they basically picked what they thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's what they did.
Yeah, that's the problem with translating languages.
That's what I'm saying. But that's why it's good that we go back and look at it if there's any question.
That's right. That's right. So then he says, why do I take my flesh in my teeth and put my life in my hands? Verse 14. Here's this excuse. What does why does Job jeopardize everything to maintain his integrity and the innocence? If what you're saying is true and I've sinned, why do I jeopardize talking with God or anything else? If what you're saying is true, I put my life in my hand. In essence, I'm taking my own life in my hand by saying that I am innocent, because I am innocent, because I've not done anything to deserve this. So why do I even say these things? And this is what I love in verse 15. Though he slay me, I will still trust him. I love his faith. Whatever burden God allowed Job to bear, whatever problems Job still knows that God will be his salvation. And there is something here that I appreciate. There's a determined trustfulness. Lord, I don't understand why I'm going through all of this, but I am determined to trust you. You will do what's right. And again, I love that. I love that. Even though there's a lot of things he can't understand, he's sure that God will not fail him. Though he slay me, yet I will trust him. One of my favorite verses in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
God, I don't understand why I had to lose a son. I don't understand why it seems like we're very teetering on the brink of war again. I don't understand why that people can't see you working. I don't understand why. But Lord, I still trust you.
I got falsely accused of something, and I was totally confident.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I didn't do anything wrong. And I'm like, the truth will come out. It didn't right away.
Mm-hmm.
It was very painful. And it came to the point where I was almost like serious trouble over something I didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
Because someone just accused me of doing it.
Right.
It was like a few years ago. It was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked out in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lesson from it too.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though I wasn't guilty of that, I was making some bad decisions, maybe.
Right.
Being with the wrong people and that kind of thing.
And that also can come into play. So I think it's one of those verses we need to memorize. Though he slay me, yet I will trust him.
Yeah.
No matter what. No matter what happens, I'm going to trust him. Even if I'm at the point of death with somebody sticking a gun in my head,
I mean, death would not be, when it says sin leads to death, but death would not be equivalent for it. That would not be the end of it. It doesn't seem like, because if they just died, and that would be like purgatory or something. They just died and then they went to heaven. So what I'm saying is that death is not, that's just the beginning of trouble.
Right.
So if they die and they don't have a chance to repent, then that's even worse.
That's right.
It's kind of like if you commit suicide. You just did a crime and killed yourself, and you can't undo it. Isn't there a verse that says something about you could repay a man's cattle, but you can't give him back his life or something like that? There's something like that. I can't
think of it right off the top of my head.
There's some verse that I read a long time ago. I don't remember. I know it's Old Testament, but it says something about you can't give a man back his life. That's one thing. You can repay something you stole, but if you kill a man,
you can't do nothing about it.
You
can't bring it back. That's right. And that's probably the reason why God in the Old Testament said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. You've got to pay the price.
But I think I get what he's saying, though, and it's a righteous thing to say. And it's like something Paul said, similar to when he said, I'd go to hell for the Jews. I'd go to hell for them, my brethren, if they would come to Jesus.
Okay, we'll stop here. Okay, we're in chapter 13, verse 15. Though he slay me, yet I will trust him. And then Job goes on and says, even though I will maintain my ways before him, even though I will defend my own ways before him. So putting it back, he says, you know what? If God chooses to slay me, I'll still trust him, and I'll still know that he's there. But you know what? I'm still going to maintain my innocence before him. So that's that. Verse 16, he shall be my salvation. He still trusts God to save him. All right. Whatever burden God allows Job to bear, whatever problems, Job still knows that God will be his salvation.
That's faith.
That's faith. It's a determined trustfulness. It's a situation where things are just as bleak as they could be. You can't see the light of day. Your heart is overwhelmed with sorrow. Your friends come, they try to encourage you, and instead they just discourage you even that much more. And then you're saying, you know what, no matter what, I'm still trusting God. He knows his heart is right with God, even though there's a lot of this he don't understand, don't even have a clue about. He knows that in the end, God will not fail him. That's faith. And that's where we all need to get. I wanted to study this again because this is just a great reminder for me. If he was a hypocrite, he would feel different. You know what? He shall be my salvation, for a hypocrite could not come before him. The point he's trying to make, if I was play acting in all of this, I couldn't stand in God's presence. But he says, you know what? I know that God's going to do what's best, and I know that God's going to take care of me no matter what the circumstances is. So let come what may. Listen carefully to my speech. And listen, he says, to my declaration with your ears. See, I have prepared my case. I know that I shall be vindicated. Who is he who will contend with me? If now I hold my tongue,
I don't think he said that right, though. He said, listen carefully to my speech. That's what he said.
Maybe. Yeah. Listen carefully to me. That's right.
I don't like he's like saying it softly. Like that's like what he's screaming out.
That's right. So he's saying, I've arranged everything in a solemn defense. I know what I'm about to say. I know that my declaration, he said, I have prepared my case. Notice he said, what? I prepared my case. I've got all the evidence that I need. When my case is fully heard, it's kind of like, again, a court. Then my cause will be justified. You know what? And after it's all over with, it will appear that Job has not sinned and brought this on himself. Everybody's going to know then that
Job is going to come before the judgment seat of Christ, and he knows that.
Yeah.
He knows that.
Yeah.
Because everyone's going to come for it.
And that's right. But even here, he's saying it was looking at it from that viewpoint. He's just talking about it from God, from the viewpoint of God. So he says, you know what? I know, he says, I know that I shall be vindicated. He has not brought this on himself. So he says, in essence, verse 19. So who's it going to be that's going to contend with me? I don't know why. I've always, every time I look at this passage, I also think of a courtroom. God is a judge.
I think of it's like a courtroom anyways.
Yeah.
We see the judgment seat of Christ, like, except for more exalted, though.
Right, obviously.
Obviously more exalted, like the judge is a human being. So.
Yeah. But in this case, obviously, God knows everything. But Job, and think about this in this respect. You've probably seen courtroom movies and trials and stuff like that. And the thing is that you're always hiring this defense attorney to get you off on some legal technicality.
I was wondering
sometimes.
About that. I was wondering about how they, like, do they lie to the lawyer or what do they do?
Yeah. There's a show that I enjoy watching. It's an old show. It's a black and white show, Perry Mason. All right, years ago, and even in the 1990s, he was still there. He wasn't, but he would always get all of his clients off. Don't know of a case that he didn't lose. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you sit there and listen, as he would be dealing with the arguments and dealing with the facts and dealing with the proof, this is part of the thing that I love about the show. He always exonerates the one who's been charged, but he also finds the guy that's guilty. Now, I vision the ideal of a judge, and there's not going to be no need of attorney or anything there because he knows the truth anyway. And so Job is saying, in essence, you know what? I've prepared my case. I'm ready to go. He's going to find me not guilty.
He's going to show people.
Yeah.
He's going to show them, and he's going to visually show them, oh, you didn't say this at this time, at this date, this. Mm-hmm. That's what he's going to do.
Yeah. He's going to show. And so, he's arranged everything for this defense. He said, I know what I'm about to say. I know I'll be justified. When my case is fully heard, my cause will be right. And then it will appear that Job had not sinned and brought it on himself. So who's going to plead with me? He says, verse 19, who is he who will contend with me? He said, if now I hold my tongue, then I'll die. I've got to either speak or die, one or the other.
They're like bullying him or something.
They're what now?
You feel like they're bullying him or something?
I think that they have, the French have.
Like he feels like he's been picked on or something.
Yeah. And the thing is that as we come to the end of it, God speaks finally and tells the friends, everything Job has said about me is right. The only thing that possibly God could say about Job is that in the heat of the moment, because of his emotional status, that he does go a little bit far in questioning God as to why. And that's about the extent that he's going to say, that's the only thing. And Job will repent of that. He will repent of that. But as you look at it, it's just beautiful the way he says it. Now, verses 20 through 28 is here you have him. He's not talking to the friends no more. He says, he's talking to God here. Two things do not do to me. Then I will not hide myself from you. Withdraw your hand far from me and let not the dread of you make me afraid. Then call and I will answer. Let me speak that you may respond to me. How many are my iniquities and sins? Make me know my transgression and my sin. Why do you hide your face and regard me as your enemy? Will you frighten a leaf driven to and fro? Will you pursue dry stubble? For you write bitter things against me and make me inherit the iniquities of my youth. You put my feet in the stocks.
He sinned. He sinned before.
Yeah, he has talked. I mean, he has sinned before.
Iniquities of my youth.
Yeah. And watch closely on my path. You set a limit for the soles of my feet. Man decays like a rotten thing, like a garment that is moth-eaten. So here we have him talking to God now. he's making this request before he begins his plea. And so from here on into the 14th chapter, he's talking to God. He ain't even talking to his friends anymore. He's talking to God. All righty. He says, I will not hide myself from you. Let not the dread of you make me afraid. In other words, Lord, as I come into your presence, there's a certain amount of fear that I'm going to have. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, you know. So, Lord, continue to stand with me. See the case through. Withdraw your hand from me. In other words, remove this pain that I'm feeling. He wants an end to the suffering, at least long enough for the proceeding to go on. Again, try to see a courtroom scene here. So I'm suffering. Let not thy dread make me afraid. God, don't terrify me mentally or spiritually. Don't come on to me so strong that I just can't do nothing but quake in my boots. Think about every other time when God supposedly appeared in the Old Testament. And every time people will fall down on their knees. They will fall down on their face because of his glory and his praise. And God, he's saying, God, let me not be so afraid that I'll be terrified.
They didn't want to be destroyed.
Yeah, that's it.
They want to be destroyed.
And he says, in essence, unless I have these two promises from you, he says, I can't be honestly arguing my case. Then verse 22, then call and I will answer. If you keep these promises, withdraw your hand from me, let not the dread of you make me afraid, then call and I will answer. He wants God to plead with him. He wants God to tell him what he's done wrong. And he said, I'll give an answer for what I've done. Think about on the day of judgment. Mankind could not stand before the pure, holy God were it not for the fact that he withdraws his hand long enough to listen to the case.
What do you mean, his hand?
His hand of punishment, his hand of justice. In other words, I believe whenever you look there on the day of Pentecost or on the day of judgment, as I see it in my mind, he's going to call every one of us to account. He's going to call every one of us up there and say, okay, what about this, 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 and this?
Yeah.
And, my answer on that day is going to be, Lord, I did that, I did that, I did that, I did that, I did that. But Lord, your son's blood took care of it. That's all I can trust in.
Yeah.
The blood of Jesus.
Well, I mean, I think this is the problem with a lot of Calvinists, though, is that I was just thinking about that the other day. It's like, it's not finalized. The ink is not final. It's like,
get the judgment
it's like Jesus put his credit card on the table,
mm-hmm.
but the full amount's not been paid yet.
Not yet.
It's like faith of things hoped for.
That's right.
But in Matthew 7, it's a possibility that even though you're professing and you think you're a Christian,
mm-hmm.
that he can still. And this is guys who says, I know you,
mm-hmm.
and I studied your word.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I cast out demons. I did this.
Yeah. And the thing is, on that day, we trust in Christ, but at the same time, because we trust in Christ's blood, that doesn't give me the opportunity just to go out there and continue to live a life of sin.
But you know what he said, right? He said, those do the will of the Father.
Right.
Do you know what the will of the Father is? Doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
That is what that is.
Mm-hmm.
That's doctrine.
Right.
That
doing
means,
the will of God.
That means doing what's in the Bible.
That's right.
Rather than something crazy over here.
That's exactly right. Amen. Amen. So he says, if God, you don't want to do it that way, let me start the proceedings and you receive the answer. He says, he's struggling with this whole idea of what all's going on. Now think about this as well. If Job, under other circumstances, may have been like his friends, may have judged his other people, but he says, no, I know now. So he asked the question, how many are my iniquities and sins? Again, another thing I visualize is maybe, like you said, maybe there's a PowerPoint and he shows you everything that you've done wrong.
Oh, he's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's going to have a screen there. and he's going to be like, this is what you said to this person at that time.
Yep.
There's going to be no way you can deny it.
Nope.
He's going to make sure that you, even yourself, know that he knows that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what he's saying, he said, how many are my iniquities? Name them. Let me know exactly what they are, so I can look at myself and see it as well. Lord, I want to see this, Lord. Make me know my transgressions. Why do you hide your face and regard me as your enemy? Why do you hide your face and treat me this way? Lord, he doesn't believe God is his enemy as much as it's what? Because before he talked about, even though he slay me, I will trust him. But he's saying what? Why? Why this present alienation? Why right now? Why? Why do you regard me as an enemy right now? And then he says, you know what? I'm just like a leaf. It dries up, blows off the tree. That's it. There's nothing there. I'm dead. Will you pursue dry stubble? Will you pursue some of these things? God, I can't believe that you would take your almighty power and destroy somebody like me who is so right now weak and feeble from sickness and just from emotional and every other kind of punishment you can think. I can't imagine. Why? He says, verse 26, you write bitter things against me. You make me inherit the iniquities of my youth. Again, Lord, if you're drawing up your indictment against me, what things are you going to charge me with? The sins of my youth? Yes, I've got them. That's the only thing that I think of that you might indict me on anything. But how can God, being a merciful and just God and loving God, exact punishment for sins that I committed when I was so immature? And Lord, the thing that we think we can realize and understand is, God, there's no statute of limitations for sin. God is going to punish every sin unless they have been forgiven.
I just thought about that, though. Jesus would have had to have been really competent as a little kid. I mean, he was obviously competent at 12 years old, but I'm saying he would have had to have been very aware that, like, I can't go and steal a loaf of bread over here.
That's exactly right.
I'm saying, like, he couldn't have been a normal 2-year-old or whatever.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It's the more we get into this kind of thought, the more we begin to
because we can't come through that.
Yeah.
We can't come through that without getting prickers all over us.
Mm-hmm.
We can't come through there without smelling like a rose.
Right.
Because it's bound. It's like with our world and the way it is, we're bound to do something.
Right. And so then in verse 27 and 28, he says this: you put my feet in the stocks. And the stocks, of course, would be, there's something that was common to the Greeks, the Romans, the Israelites, the Arabians.
It's like where they put their head in that thing.
Yeah. Sometimes they put your head in
arms, and then it's for shame.
It's for shame, but it's also sometimes depending on how long you're in there, how long you're in the stocks.
Yeah.
It could kill you if you don't, do something about it. So, Lord, you're watching closely all my path. You can see everywhere I go. And Lord, more than that, you would, you can look at all my paths and you mark where my feet go and cause me to feel the guilt and pain for my sin immediately. So, verse 28, man decays like a rotten thing and like a garment that is moth-eaten. A lot of times, sores all over his body, moth-eaten holes all in his clothes. That's just what's going on with him. And so we come to chapter 14. And hopefully we'll get finished with it before 9:00 tonight, God willing. And at this rate, 3 chapters a night, we're not going to finish the book. But so obviously, but at least right now, we are getting the gist of what's happening, right? The gist of his friends, the gist of what God is doing, the gist of what Job is doing. this section here breaks into this. And from here on out, it's just kind of the same. It kind of becomes the same thing over and over and over again. So the same discussions only becomes a little bit more vehement. So what is he saying? Chapter 14, verses 1 through 6, he said, God, please forgive me, or please give me comfort until I die. In verses 7 through 12, he emphasizes the idea that, you know, unlike trees, man shall not rise again until heaven and earth are passed away. When you cut a tree down, sometimes a shoot can come out of the stump and it grow again, right? He emphasizes verse 13 through 17 that he wants to be in the grave until God's anger is past. And he closes with saying, Lord, I'm homeless. I'm living in pain. And I'm just, I see a man that's just tired. Tired in a way that we don't even have no knowledge of.
Like an old cowboy or something.
Even worse than that.
I was thinking like, well, like
he's been rode hard, put down wet. He's broken every bone in his body. He's this fever that's over his whole body with all of this disease. He just wants some relief. This chapter is a little bit milder than the previous two. It seems like the chapter 12 and 13, he's really vented his feelings, and now he just kind of talks about the whole condition of humanity. And a lot of times this chapter is read at funerals.
What?
This chapter.
14?
Yeah. So we're going to notice, and as you're looking through it, just kind of look for those funeral themes as we go through here. And I think if we really meditate on what he's saying here, it's going to help us to deal with those that we love that's gone. So let's just listen to what he has to say, verses 1 through 6. Man who's born of woman is few days and full of trouble. Comes forth like a flower and fades away. You think about a flower. Think about you buy roses for somebody and they're gone in no time at all. Mm-hmm. He flees like a shadow. So it's kind of like a flower, a shadow. And do you open your eyes on such a one and bring me to judgment with yourself? Who could bring a clean thing out of an unclean thing? No one. His days are numbered. The number of his months is with you. You've appointed his limits so that he cannot pass. Look away from him that he may rest, till like a hired hand or hired man, he finishes his day. Oh, that's okay, go ahead. All right, chapter 14, verse 1. Man born of woman is full of a few days and full of trouble. Many see in this verse that the woman is the inherent weaker vessel. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. For many years after birth, she takes care of him, and then he realizes his weaknesses. He says, we're just here for a few days. As men look back on their lives, they often feel like Job does. And Job was about 130 when he said, few and evil had been the days of his life. Methuselah, the oldest man, 969 years, probably felt like 969 years was not that long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, but think about this in this respect. I remember when I was a young man, 10, 15 years old, and growing up, all my plans and dreams, I get married. And then it's kind of like I had children. And then it's kind of like we blinked, and my wife and I have been married 41 years now. And we've seen not only our children grow, but marry and grandchildren now, and they're growing up. And the thing is, you know, a lot of people probably right before they die, they probably feel like, you know, there was a lot of other things I wanted to do while I was still here.
Of course.
But, you know.
They thought they were going to get right with God, too.
Yeah. Yeah. But he goes on and he says, the days of here on earth are also full of trouble. And again, that's so true, right? It's just so true. That's what Eliphaz said in his first speech. In verse 2, he said, he comes forth like a flower and fades away, cut down. You know, again, this is a simile, and that is often used in the scriptures A simile is a comparison using like or as. So a man comes forth like a flower, so he's like a flower. And again, Psalms 103:15, Isaiah 28, verse 1 and 4, Isaiah 46 and 7, James 1, 10 and 11, 1 Peter 1:24. There probably were a lot of flowers near Job that wouldn't even last longer than a day. We go spend chunks of money for roses. And again, how long do the roses last? Even in water, not long. Sunflowers. The flea is a shadow. Shadows are always changing because the sun is always changing or the earth is always changing its position in relation to the sun. So he says, he says, why do you even open your eyes on such a one? Why do you even pay attention? As great as you are, as all-knowing as you are, why do you even notice mere man? And again, a lot of people today, does God really pay attention to us? Is he really watching everything that we do?
Yeah.
Of course, those of us that are Christians, we know that he is, but there are others, the Epicureans, thought that he created the world and then just stepped back and he has nothing whatsoever to do with it now. Yeah. So Job is not expressing his doubt that God watches man. He's saying, why bother? Why bother? Why do you open your eyes on such a one and bring judgment to yourself? Why would you punish a weak, helpless creature like me? Because think about it in this respect. We are all weak and helpless. Now, most of us wouldn't want to admit to that, especially when we're younger. But as we get older, yeah, we can't do the things we used to do. Our bodies can't. We've been too rough on our bodies. We've broken too many bones. Too many things have happened. We can't do what we once did.
He needed a Bible.
Yeah,
that's what he needed. He needed something to go and put this energy to a better use or something.
Yeah, and again,
I'm not saying it wasn't a good use because this is a good use for us.
Yeah,
but I'm saying it seems like at that point he needed something there. Like he could have maybe went to the scriptures and he would have had the scriptures or something. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe even the Old Testament scriptures. Right? Wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, don't you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, I do that for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my whole thing is I try to.
That's it. That's
deal with life.
That's what you got to do.
And the scriptures.
Yeah. So he says in verse 4, who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? A lot of people go to this passage to try to prove original sin, that we were born with it. Okay.
I was thinking Jesus could bring a clean thing.
That's true. That's true. But we also know Ezekiel 18 says, we're not born. We're not born with
argument,
sin.
But the argument is about the nature of people. It's not. It's not sin itself. I don't know. I don't 100% agree with their take on it, but I kind of get what that's like. You're saying spiritual death. That's the equivalent of what they're saying, but they might say it a different way. Like the original sin, we obviously don't have original sin. It's
right.
Based on what you.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. So God, since his days are numbered, the number of his months is with you. Lord, you know how long a man's going to live. Man's life is short. It doesn't last that long at all. Like I said, Methuselah lived to be 969 years. But then you come back later to the Bible and it will say that the extent of man's life might be 70, perhaps 80, 60, 70, 80 years old, and that's it.
I don't want any part of that.
So the number of his months are with thee. In other words, Lord, you know how long a man lives. God knows when I'm going to die. God knows when you're going to die.
It's going to be right on time.
It's going to be on his time.
It's going to be on time.
It's
going to be right on time. Not going to be late or early.
That's right. You have appointed his limits so that he cannot pass. Okay, we can't live past what God allows. God's in control. We can't do anything to change it. It is what it is. So look away from him. Turn from him that he may rest. In view of the fact that man's time on earth is so short, then Lord, just don't keep punishing me. Just give me a little bit of respite for a little bit of time that I've got left. Okay, just like a hired man, a man that has to go work out in the field, and he works out in the field, say 8 to 10 hours. What's he looking for? Working out there in the field for 8 or 10 hours, you looking for the chance to rest, to just quit for a few minutes, you know, and that's it. And that's what he's saying. God, you know, man should rejoice when life is over, with his pain and trouble comes to an end. But then if we're not where we need to be, then you've got even worse pain and trouble, right?
I was thinking about he's like a cowboy that got shot. You ever see those movies where it's like they have that moment, they're just like, I just stare at the sun or something, like they're gonna die or something.
Yeah. Hey, I'm with you. I've been lately everything on television is not worth watching.
No, like contemplating life. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, everything I watch now is the Westerns. That's all. Yeah. And I was joking about it the other day. I said, you know, brethren, I said this to the church. I said, we talk a lot about sin and we see it on the television. I said, I started watching Westerns and I said, ain't nobody, somebody's going to get killed in Gunsmoke every episode. Somebody's going to get killed. Yeah. And they all looked at me and just started laughing. And I said, you know what? That's a good reminder for all of us. We're all going to die. Okay, that's it. Yeah. He said, verse 7, there's hope for a tree. You know, if it's cut down, it'll sprout again. You know, you cut off a tree. Sometimes shoots will grow out of the stumps or the roots. There's hope for a tree cut down, but when a man's cut down, no. Now, this was before the ideal of a resurrection. I don't know what their beliefs in the afterlife was. They knew that they were obviously going to be at a day of judgment. We just studied that. But did they believe? Did they have some conception of what punishment was and what heaven was going to be like? Obviously. We do see some passages of scripture where some in the Old Testament looked forward to the time of death to be with God. But we get into a lot of discussions as to, especially as old as Job is, we get into a lot of discussions as to what exactly did he mean, you know, what it was going to boil down to. So he again emphasizes the idea, these shoots grow as big as a tree. He said, though the root waxes old in the earth, the stock dies, yet the scent of water will cause it to come forth like a plant. This is just the same continuation.
I think it's just like, you know, even though that if maybe I know that I'm going to go to heaven. Well, I don't know that. No one knows that. But you know what I'm saying? I'm pretty confident because I know that, like, I've labored in the Lord and all this other whatever. But either way, even as tough as you are and as ready as you are, when death comes upon you, it's kind of a scary thing.
It is a scary thing.
And I mean, like, anyone's ever been in that situation where death was imminent, like, you know.
Yeah.
And especially if you get like a few seconds warning or something like that.
Right.
That's worse.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And he probably thought he was going to die.
He did.
I would have thought I was going to die.
Yeah, especially as all the things he's been going through. But then he says this. He said, the scent of water will bring forth branches, but man dies and is laid away. He breathes his last, and where is he? So man dies. A brave, strong man dies, pass away, they're gone. They come to nothing, with no vitality or strength. Paul will say we die daily, don't he?
What's the definition of torrent?
Of what?
Torrent.
Where are you?
It's you already got there yet? You're 19. Did you already do that?
Oh, the torrents is water.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I was just verses 9, 10, 11. So you jumped on down before me a little bit. So that's okay.
You read the whole thing.
No. Well, I don't think I have read the whole thing, but anyway, let's go on. Water disappears from the sea, a river becomes parched and dries up, so a man lies down and does not rise, verse 10, 11, 12, till the heavens are no more. Now, what heavens? Heavens in the Bible was talking about, one place it's talking about where God dwells, but another place it talks about the earth, sky, sun, moon, rain.
Are the what do you call it, atmosphere around the earth?
Yeah, the atmosphere around the earth will be called the heavens. Then they will not awake nor be roused from their sleep. So he breathes his last, and Lord, that you hide me in the grave. Conceal me when your wrath is past. That's it. That's what he's saying. He's talking about the idea of going through all of this. The waters fail from the sea. He compares man to flood waters, rivers, and all floods, and then what? They're gone, right? That's the way man is. They're cut off. It decays. It dries up. Man lies down in death. He does not know anything left in this world, right? So the idea that we have here is in this one clause. Some people say that this is not an absolute denial of the final resurrection until the heavens be no more, but we understand that the resurrection will be with the destruction of the earth. So 2 Peter chapter 3.
That's not good. No.
Yeah.
When they're talking about that, they're talking about destruction of the physical
earth. That's right.
The physical realm.
That's right. So verse 13 through 17. Oh, that you would hide me in the grave. Protect me in the land of departed spirits. The grave in the Old Testament would have been Sheol. He wants to stay there until God's wrath and punishment for his sins have passed. He assumes punishment for youthful sins. We've already seen that. And wishes he could die to get out of the said punishment, if that's what he was being held accountable for.
That would be confusing to count.
Yeah. Yeah. So he doesn't care how long he has to suffer. All he asks is that he has a set time. Kind of like Noah and the ark. There came a time when God remembered him, right? In Noah.
Mm-hmm.
So like saints are in the grave, there will come a time when God will remember them. Well, he already knows them.
Because they're baptized in the floods.
Mm-hmm. So he says, ask the question, if a man dies, shall he live again? Now, is this really is this a question of resurrection or an expression of hopelessness? I think at this stage of the game, in Job's life, it's kind of an expression of hopelessness. He brings out that once a man dies, he can't live again. And he said, if it were possible for me to do so, that I should wait and endure any suffering in the hopes that maybe it will get better, but till my change shall come. He says, all the days of my hard service, I will wait till my change comes.
That's all I was saying, though. It's like fear of the other side.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether we know Jesus or not, there
is a certain fear of the other side because it's unknown.
Yeah. And then but you don't know. And it's like, it's not something that's like normal to you. Like if you had cancer and you were dying of cancer or something like that, you'd still be kind of worried, even whether you're a Christian or not.
Right. That's right. So he says, Lord, shall he live again? Is it an expression of hopelessness? I don't think so. I think it's an admiration of what's going to take place at the resurrection. He says, then what? You shall call and I will answer you. You shall desire the work of your hands. After death, God will call, Job will answer. Does Job believe in the resurrection? Yes, he does. Does Job believe that there's life after death? Yes, he does. And so that's what he's trying to say. That's what he's saying. You will call after death, and every man, good or bad, will answer God's call at the resurrection. So he assumes here in verse 15, you shall desire the work of your hands. So even here, I don't know that they had a total understanding of what's going to happen after death, but Job here obviously emphasizes a faith in something beyond this life.
Mm-hmm.
You shall call, I will answer.
He doesn't have a real clear vision.
He doesn't have a real clear vision, but do we?
No, but I'm saying I think that might be because I don't think they really had a clear vision of it in the Old Testament anyways.
In the Old Testament, they did not. We have maybe a little bit better.
I mean, usually when they talk about, this is the one thing I get into, and I know people will argue with this because you say, well, the Holy Spirit spoke into this, and you have to take the situation and what's being said there. Like, for instance, if the Pharisees were saying something about Jesus, that doesn't mean that the Holy Spirit was speaking through the Pharisees. You know what I mean? Maybe so it was willed to happen. But what I'm saying is, I guess, like they make statements like, well, I know my enemies are in Sheol.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's like a comforting thing to say.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like, okay, well, that's up to God. It's not up to you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because Sheol, in the context, depending on the context, could simply mean they're in the grave. That's it.
Well, I think that he meant that hell.
Right.
Or he meant torment.
Right.
When they said that. But I'm saying, like, they don't know that.
They don't.
They don't know that. They don't have, I don't think that was a situation where they had divine revelation of it. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
So, I mean, he's just alluding to some things and he's showing kind of like his limitations as a human too, though.
Right. And he said, you know what? If it were possible, I'd continue to wait to go through this suffering, but then my change, my release, let's see, what is it, verse 14, till my change shall come. Yeah, till my change comes there in verse 14. He knows he's going to be changed. His release might be another way of putting that. And so he's hoping for that time to be up. So he's asking, now you number my steps, but do not watch over my sin. His steps are observed. Lord, you know the false steps that I've taken, you know. And here it's kind of like, God, it seems like you're just taking too much out of me. I know that you still love me and all, but you're just taking too much out of me. I can't make it much longer. I can't make it much further. I'm going. I'm going to die too. Because you number the steps. You know every move I make. You punish me for everything I do wrong. My transgression is sealed up in a bag, and you cover my iniquity. God is keeping account of all his transgressions, seals them up in the bag, and sews up his iniquity. In other words, it can't be lost. So
sounds like David.
Yeah, God is reserving his sins until punished or judgment. And I think Job is right in suggesting that God's justice and the fact that God does punish for sin, but I think he's wrong in suggesting that God goes to an extremity and marking wrong and doing sin. He sins sin, but he's still merciful and loving to those who do sin.
But you know, this right here reminds me of David when he's talking about this and that verse that people take where God does not impute sin.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that what it's saying is talking about Jesus' sacrifice on the cross takes our sin prior to coming to, you know what I'm saying? Prior to coming to Jesus. Like, in other words, that's not talking about now. I mean, he may forgive you for your sins, but what I'm saying is David was saying he was forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
He believed that.
Yeah. I repented.
That's right.
And I've been.
And he trusted God to forgive him because of that. That's
what I think it means to not impute sin. It's not.
To not put it on my account.
Yeah. It doesn't mean like, it doesn't mean you can do whatever you want to do.
So it's kind of a ledger book. And the things you do, here it is. I've got it down. And here's the ways that we wipe it out.
But I mean, this is the precursor to that whole system.
Right.
That's what he's alluding to.
Right.
It's the same thing David was talking about.
Right. And I think they all knew that what Paul would say in the blood of bulls and goats could never take away sins. Yeah. But it was always pointing to the idea that there had to be a perfect sacrifice. There had to be the son, the seed of David, the seed of Abraham, the seed of Isaac, and how it all plays out. I think they hope for and look for that. But
I'm saying here, like he's talking about here, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of alludes, it doesn't allude to the fact that he knows Jesus, but it alludes to the fact that like he knows that God can take the sin away from him or not necessarily punish him with an eternal punishment or whatever.
Right. Go back to Genesis or Job chapter 1. Whenever his children had eaten, he would always offer a sacrifice saying, perhaps they may have sin in their heart. So he would always offer these sacrifices. He's always done what he was supposed to do under the covenant that he was under.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why he trusted God to forgive him, because he had always done that. So now he's really struggling with, why am I suffering? Why am I dealing with this? So we close up as the mountain falls and the crumbles away. All right. We're living in a dying world. This kind of lends itself to what? The feeling of hopelessness. He says, as a mountain falls and crumbles away, as a rock is moved from its place. Think about.
You think it is hopeless? I feel like it's a good thing. I don't look at it like hopeless for the world to burn.
Okay, I see what you're saying, but does Job have the same
I know
view?
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but I'm saying people look at it like that.
Yeah.
I don't look at it like that. I look at it as excitement.
Yeah, because the Lord's going to be here. Think about the idea in verses 18 and 19. He talks about
the destruction of the world.
Yeah, here he's talking about mountain moving away. Think about Mount St. Helens, whatever it blew, what it looked like. A rock is moved from its place. As water wears away stones, erosion. Torrents wash away the soul of the earth. So you destroy the hope of man. There's a lot of things he's saying, the world is wearing itself out.
Mm-hmm.
So consider the erosive quality of water wearing away a rock bit by bit. The Colorado River, supposedly, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Cut out the Grand Canyon.
Oh, yeah, it did happen.
Yeah.
I seen a guy that's explaining all about that.
Yeah. And I think that happened during the flood.
I do absolutely believe that. They found shells on top of the tallest mountain in the world.
That's right. That's right.
So
you destroy the hope of man. God, all these things happen. So you destroy the hope of man.
I think that's saying like, man thinks that he's going to do something next week or something, and he dies. God knows that he's going to die that time.
Right.
So no one's ever thinking like, okay, yeah, I'm going to die tomorrow.
Right. Nobody ever does.
I mean? So he's got hopes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
And here's, just as God can destroy a mountain like that, just as water can erode a rock, God can easily destroy the hope of a man.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of vain for man to hope for much, to enjoy much from this life, and it kind of gets kind of sad here. Death is going to be the end of it all. The hopes of the aspiration of this life. All right. Only the hope we have is that we'll live on and have an eternal life. He says you prevail forever against him, and he passes on. God prevails against man by afflictions. And again, man goes away, changes his countenance. He's sending him away from life on earth to the grave.
Again?
Huh?
What does that mean, continence again? I forget.
Where is it now?
Like
his countenance is his face, what it looks like. You change his countenance and his face.
Word I use a lot.
Yeah, I know, because it's an Old Testament word, but it was also a word that suggested the idea of what the face looked like.
Okay.
Think about pictures of when you were a little boy and what the pictures are now. Take a picture. But think about how you've changed from the time you've been a little boy to now. Huh?
That's what
you changed your countenance.
Progression.
Yeah. From health to sickness to death, then decay, right? His sons come to honor. He does not know it. He's dead. They're brought low and he does not perceive it. But his flesh will be in pain over it, and his soul will mourn over it. What is he saying? After man's dead, in conflict with death, his sons may be honored, but he doesn't know anything about it.
Saying that reading this at funerals, I don't think I'll read this at a funeral.
No, I wouldn't either, but some folks, yeah.
It's kind of like...
It's kind of a bummer. It's kind of a lower, yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know, like where's the gun at?
Yeah, right. A man lies dying, he shall have pain. We should not wait upon our deathbed to repent when we're in no shape to do so. Again, we shall mourn. And this pretty well ends the first cycle of speeches. All right. So chapter 15 starts the whole cycle all over again with Eliphaz.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to go through kind of the same. Now, what I want to encourage you to do, and I went through these kind of slowly. But what I want to do now is kind of go through these arguments a little faster.
Yeah.
Because they're going to say the same things.
Yeah, I got you.
And I don't want to get so bogged down with all of this that we just don't get through the book. Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is going to try to start going faster from here on out so that we can see how it finally ends. I want to finally get to the speech God makes.
Yeah.
And how it finally ends.
I know, I've read that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So that's what I'm trying to do. And that's where I'm trying to get. All right. So 3/15/2022 is where we'll begin Job chapter 15. All right. And according to this, we still have 2/3 more of the book to go.
We did it with Luke.
Yeah, I know. But again, now that we've saw the gist, maybe now we can go from there.
That's a big book to try to tackle.
Luke,
no,
Job,
this
yeah.
one is a big book.
Trying to teach the Psalms. That's why we have to break Psalms down into 2 classes.
I can never do that. That's what I was saying too about reading all the way through.
Yeah.
Like I could read the New Testament all the way through, but I've tried when I try to read the whole Bible all the way through, I would get to Psalms or Proverbs. I'm like, I can only take so many Psalms and Proverbs. It's just like numbers. It's not that I don't like them. It's just like there's too many thoughts in there.
Yeah.
It's like I can't take all that randomness and do anything with it. It's just a bunch of information.
Well, the more you study it, the better, especially if you put some of the Psalms in the context of when they were written.
I mean,
then that helps out.
Shelf space to put something, right?
Yeah.
You can't just throw a bunch of books on the floor and then like what you know what I mean? Like what I'm saying is it's just a lot of small thoughts. Like no